Well, Stu, here we are for another session, and this will be, I believe, our 33rd, I believe.
Nothing to talk about. Nothing happened.
No, nothing. And you're going to be taking a hiatus, I
Yes,
think.
I am. I'm going to go on down to Florida, visit with old friends and see my lady Sandy down there and some other buddies, and maybe play some golf and have a couple of cocktails and all.
Isn't that something, Stu? I'm surprised you're not going to Gaza, to the new Trump casino.
Oh, God. What did he call it? The Riviera? He's going to make it
The Gaza Riviera.
Gaza Riviera.
Right. But we'll get to that.
But they can't live there, though.
So if you see that we're missing a week, you'll know it's because Stu is out gallivanting around the country.
We're not going to miss a week.
Well, we are. We're going to have 1 week. We're going to have a hiatus.
Oh, yeah, we are. That's right.
Stu, what has happened? I think you're so excited for your gallivant.
No, I helped plan this thing, and then I forgot there was a week.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope you'll probably miss us during it. We'll give you time to catch up.
I think that's more the issue.
But Stu is like a type of person who puts a smiley face above his eyes because he always wants to see the positive thing.
That's not true, but
it is true. Compared to me. So we're going to let Mr. Sunshine start with a very uplifting story and an update.
Well, we all know the name Daniel Penny. I'm sure whether you live in the U.S. or not, his name may have come to mind. And Penny, in 2023, and he's a Long Island native, and he's a former architecture student. He came to the aid of a bunch of frightened subway riders on the F train, folks know where that goes, and grappled with a guy named Jordan Neely, black guy, 30-year-old with a long history of arrests and mental illness, both. Penny, a former Marine, got Neely in a chokehold. Neely died. Well, that, of course, brought up lots of talk from, I guess, both sides of the issue. And when I saw some stuff, I said, these people were frightened for their lives and their welfare, and I'm not going to come down hard on this guy. At any rate, Penny was charged by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
I don't mean to interrupt.
You're going to say,
Fat Alvin Bragg. Fat liberal
I wrote this
Alvin.
to the script. I knew you'd probably.
Yeah, thank you.
He was charged in 2023 by the Manhattan DA Bragg with manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. In a kind of tricky little thing, he was eventually acquitted within days of both counts, but it looked a little delicate there for a moment. He was acquitted of both counts, and okay, so he goes back to trying to live a life, and that's, who knows what that is. But now it was announced by a Manhattan investment firm named Andreessen Horowitz. It was made known that they had hired him, and they planned to teach Mr. Penny the business of investing, as they said. And I mentioned here that he was an architecture student, so he's got some sense about him in math and science and mind. And he's going to work in a group that supports American interests, including the aerospace, defense, and manufacturing sectors, according to the website of the company. And I love this. It says, we believe in Daniel and are excited to have him as a part of our team. Now, no question, Andreessen has been a strong supporter of Trump and other veterans-related issues. And so I'm sure there's some, just not a reward, but a willingness, a desire to help out. There's no question, though, they wouldn't do this if they thought they were getting a dud. Doesn't make business sense. But I know that in those particular sectors, if that guy comes out with capability, his name is going to be there. People are going to know him when he walks in the door. And that's a good thing. And I just say, good going for him. He deserved he had a difficult time in this trial, held himself admirably in restraint, and I'm just glad the outcome is a good one now. There's still a civil lawsuit out there.
There's a civil lawsuit.
Let's see what happens with that.
By the deadbeat father who never even raised the kid and let him loose on the street. We've covered this before a couple of times on the podcast, and I read the story as well, and I was happy to see that Daniel has landed. Unfortunately, he landed with some Trump cronies. And I ultimately feel anyone who affiliates themselves with Trump will ultimately end up tainted. And so I have concerns about it. But I think it's, I think he deserves all the help he can get because that prosecution against him was a politically and racially motivated prosecution that should have never been brought in the first place. We on the subways of New York City are left in danger.
You know what it's like when you see some weirdo that's out there and starts to make threats. You don't know. One doesn't know what's going to happen. And this guy stood up and took some action. It turned out to be a lot, but it turned out to be justified. I think that's what the jury is saying.
Absolutely. And we wouldn't need this, and this wouldn't have happened.
Oh, of course.
If the state of New York and the New York Assembly weren't allowing criminals out onto the streets to terrorize people, not to mention the lack of oversight and care for the mentally ill.
Those are the two things.
Right. And now people, when they go to the subways too, they're standing up against the wall because they're afraid to be pushed onto the tracks. Thanks for Kathy Hochul, Hasties, Andrea Stewart Cousins, and the whole crew of losers that make up the New York City Democrat Party. And I also refer to my favorite of all of them, Reptile Schumer.
Hochul, though, has been part of the gang in a sense and helped to allow it. I didn't hear any vetoes on some of this.
No, well, it was Cuomo who put it into law.
Yeah.
But Hochul has been wholly ineffective in trying to get any changes because she has cowered to the left wing the same way Sleepy Joe Biden did. And a matter of fact, it's funny enough, before I get into my other, I heard that Joe Biden signed a talent contract with creative artists in L.A. Now, is he going to do another reprisal of that movie Weekend at Bernie's, where Bernie was basically dead? Because I have to wonder, Trump had his Oval Office on, meeting or news conference or whatever it was on Tuesday, where he made a number of spectacular statements. But when he heard about this, he scoffed and laughed. And I must scoff and laugh also because Trump noted how Biden left them a real mess. And I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. We have a $1.4 trillion deficit, high interest rates, choking off people from being able to afford a home. And, as much as I find the tactics of the Trump and his behavior unacceptable, it makes perfect sense why we are where we are when the predecessor was asleep at the switch on spending profligately on a bunch of nonsense. But that all said, Stu, this is one of the things I've noticed about this whole thing. I don't get it because if you listen to Fox News or these supporters, Trump could go onto the desk in the Oval Office and defecate all over it, and they'd be telling you what a good strategy it is and how brilliant he is. Well, the most humorous, I don't know if we can even call it humorous, Stu, I was thinking of a place to go for spring break, and I was like, maybe Mexico, maybe here. And I was running into roadblocks, and one of the reasons that holds me back on Mexico is I'm a little concerned about the security, Stu.
Oh, I'm surprised.
But, I mean, Mexico is probably a Shangri-La compared to Gaza, which, apparently Trump recently announced during this period that he was going to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, and the U.S. would take a long-term ownership position of Gaza. Now, first of all, Stu, I thought that the whole Trump thing was that we weren't going to get involved,
of course,
internationally in these long, protracted engagements. We weren't going to occupy foreign land. We were going to focus
it in the line. That's
right. But so why all of a sudden are we talking about buying Greenland, and now we're going to take over Gaza? And apparently his solution for the 2 million Palestinians is they're just going to be sent off to Egypt, to Jordan, all this place.
And those countries have expressed themselves on that.
Yeah. Let's slow down a little, Stu. First of all, those people have been there, and Egypt and all those neighboring countries don't want them.
Yep.
Because they probably can't handle the capacity, number one. Number two, what makes him think? He says these people will be happy to leave because now it's a demolition zone. Now, we all know that this is preposterous. And apparently, if you look at the face of his chief of staff, who's one of the few sane people as part of the Trump administration, when he made the statement, she had like an awestruck look on her face, like, what's he doing now? And of course, the idiots on Fox News who are they're disgraceful because they're not objective journalists. They may be opinion journalists, but they're not. They're just slavish to everything he does. They were like talking about what a great idea this is. Now, I don't really think it's a great idea, Stu. And I don't think by the end of 4 years, Gaza is going to be the Riviera. I think the Amalfi Coast might be a place to visit, but I don't think Gaza. It's absolutely absurd. And what's also funny about it, Stu, is apparently people are trying to figure out where this is all coming from. Well, his repulsive son-in-law, who is now not exactly getting all that involved in political matters these days, Jared, is down in Miami in his plush offices in Miami with a view of Biscayne Bay or whatever, living in his multi-million-dollar home with his surgically enhanced wife. Is it Ivanka? Ivanka. She's so phony in plastic, she makes melanoma look good, okay? He is the one who proposed at one point that it would be a good idea to turn like a big resort in the Gaza Strip because I guess it's coastal land and they can make it. Now, first of all, if anyone has seen any of these Trump properties, they are gauche, vulgar, overpriced, and they're not a place. If I want to go to Las Vegas, I'll go to Las Vegas. I don't need to go to Las Vegas in the Gaza Strip. And I certainly don't need to profit Jared Kushner and his slumlord dad. So I don't really understand it all. I'm confused. And I don't know how any sane person, whether you like him or not, could think it's a smart thing to say such stupid things as this.
Yep.
Most notably, all those morons on Fox News, including our new defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. So far, he hasn't gone on a bender and tried to sexually assault any women, as far as we know.
Does he continue to appear on Fox?
Well, now he does as an interviewee.
Oh.
And they, of course, are slavishly, mollycoddling him.
Of course. What kind of...
As they spew out all their Christian garbage. Yet, Pete Hegseth is far from a Christian. He is a fornicator and an adulterer, to use the language of the church lady. Remember her from Saturday Night Live? And also one of their big stars on Fox News, who is also pimping all this biblical crap, is also an adulterer. That's Jesse Waters, who has an 8 o'clock show and is, another advocate for all this nonsense. So, and as we recall, Roger Ailes, who's now dead, was basically sexually harassing all the pretty blonde women on the show. So they're like a clown college, too. But the clownery doesn't end here. I think you had a few comments about the whole situation.
Well, I did. Yeah, I do. I do have something here. Because I know sometime back in 2022, the U.S. Army renamed some military forts that had been the names of Confederate generals. Like they had Fort Bragg was renamed Fort Liberty. And Fort Gordon, and that was after a Confederate General Braxton Bragg. And Fort Gordon, where I spent a few months when I was in the Army, had been named after a Confederate General, John Brown Gordon. It was renamed Fort Eisenhower. Now, I was and am an Ike fan, but not at the price of revising history. Several months ago, Trump announced his intention to bring back the original names of military installations. I say bravo. I don't know if that's occurred yet, but I'm sure it's in
I think
process.
there was an executive order already.
Oh, another executive. Yes, no, that's fine. And that's the way he does things. And I say bravo. I don't think we should rewrite history unless we're trying to correct factual errors. On the other hand, this is where I see some kind of interesting inconsistency. Trump has announced that the Gulf of Mexico is going to be renamed the Gulf of America. Now how does
the square has renamed?
Yes,
he
has renamed it.
Executive order.
I'm sure. Yeah, sure, but I'm not sure about the future of that. How does that square with his position on military forts? I mean, he's the one repudiating history, as far as I could tell. and the arrogance of his taking it upon himself to rename a historical body of water. And how insulting that is, not only to Mexico, but other nations of the world. It's just yet another example of his acting like a tyrant, a bully, and a child. Other nations, I believe, and their people will not forget how he's treating them. And the worm can always turn at some point. It's another horrendous act. It's a little funny, though. Just before he leaves office, whenever that will be, and I have some question about that, can we look forward to his naming America Trump forever or something like that? An executive.
God forbid.
Now, I wonder, this is just musing, I wonder if cartographers, atlas makers, and the like will refuse to go along with Trump's attempt renaming the Gulf. I wonder how they're going to do it. Have they? Oh.
Yeah, apparently they have, because he doesn't really have the authority. He thinks he may have the authority to do this, but he doesn't.
So what are they resting on?
They're just, I think that, I remember hearing like Google Maps, for example, is continuing to call it the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. And it's also, once again, a very inconsistent with his isolationist foreign policy. Now, all of a sudden, he wants to be a colonist or whatever. I don't get it. I really don't. And he's also made quips about Canada becoming
sickening, and told them again during this discussion over tariffs that, you could be the 51st state.
I know.
All this what?
And I first think he's kind of joking and just being his normal self. But seriously, I think he's serious. And I also think he is so drunk with his victory that he doesn't realize that his victory wasn't all that substantial. Right. Number one, they have a 3-seat majority in the House. And two, all these executive orders, many of which have already been challenged and overturned in court, like the birthright citizenship one, and it was permanently blocked. Like today, or was it yesterday, he signed an executive order eliminating, trans males, or I guess trans females, from playing in women's sports.
I've talked about that one a number of
Right.
times.
And in all truth, there's some legitimacy to these things. Yes. But it's very complicated, the whole issue. But I'm not so sure that they even have the legal authority. And eventually, all these liberals are going to get up off their back, and they're going to get all their litigation together, and they're going to challenge this crap in court. And a lot of it's not going to, right now they're trying to stick as many things through while their enemy is down. But all they are doing really is giving their enemy ammunition.
I think so.
Fortunately for them, their enemies are idiots, because when they closed they're trying to shut down USAID, as you know.
Yes.
And that's at the behest of Elon Musk and his DOGE team. Now, that whole thing, it's not clear that they even have the legal authority to do it, because USAID was established first by Kennedy and then through legislation. Yes. So in order to eliminate it, you would probably need legislation to do it, which they probably wouldn't get. So Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, who's one of the sane people of that crowd, he said the other day, in a more temperate way compared to some of the Twitter tweets or X tweets from Musk and Trump's kind of stuff, that USA did perform a legitimate function and that it would continue to do so, but it needed to be kind of managed.
He's going to trim it down.
Right.
So there'll be some, at least as I thought about it, there'll be some remaining action. How much, I don't know. How much money will go out, I don't know. But it will not disappear entirely. So they'll get some reduction in force.
No, and I'm sure there's going to be litigation about the legal authority to even get rid of it. And even the people, they supposedly fired all the people there, but they didn't really fire them. They put them on administrative leave.
With pay.
Right, because they can't fire them because they're civil service employees. And in order to get rid of them, apparently you have to do so with cause, and they don't have a cause. Now, Musk is claiming on Twitter that USAID was evil and diabolical, and there was all this waste and abuse. But what he didn't say was that apparently he has an interest of this company called Starlink, and it was providing wireless services or whatever. I'm not sure how it works.
Defense report.
But apparently USAID was investigating Starlink and possible malfeasance. So a lot of people are questioning whether the reason why Musk has kind of targeted this organization is because they were investigating his company. Now, this is the problem when you put someone with financial interests in the government, and they're also concerned about, he's getting a lot of private information and access to it and about how the government enters into contracts, yet SpaceX enters into contracts with the government.
Yeah, no question.
So, and then in the Oval Office, Trump was questioned about all of this once again, and he was, no, Elon doesn't do anything unless he has our approval, and there won't be any conflicts of interest. Now, we already have conflicts of interest, and who's to trust Trump anyway? He's hardly someone who follows propriety. So this is really disturbing. But what's even more funny, Stu, Trump was questioned about the people working on DOGE and who they were and how they were young and inexperienced. And Trump deflected, they're all very smart, as opposed to
experience and wisdom.
Well, I mean, they may be very smart, and I'm not surprised. And well, I'm not.
I would say.
Well,
maybe not one.
One of them hasn't even graduated college. He's 19 years old, and he is going to Northeastern, and so he doesn't even have a college degree, and he's working on these matters. Now, this sensitive government data, sensitive government systems, national security data, and we're letting 19 to 25-year-olds, and they're also keeping the identity of some of these people, like they're not fully disclosing who they are. But I don't think I want to mention the name of the 19-year-old because he's just he's a high school student. But this is, and it's unclear whether any of them have national security experience, but their age ranges are 19 to 25. Now, just before we recorded today, Stu, one of these brilliant people, his name is he's 25 years old, and his name is Marco Elise. This was who we were giving access to our Treasury information and the like. Now, he had to resign today because he had a bunch of inflammatory posts on his social media posts, one of which said that he wanted to repeal the Civil Rights Acts and that he was backing a eugenic immigration policy. He said, you could not pay me to marry outside my ethnicity. And he also said he wanted to normalize Indian hate. I guess he had a antipathy towards Indians, not Native Americans, but which is kind of interesting because a lot of engineering students are Asian and a lot of these kids are Asian. I guess maybe he was unhappy that they may have done better than him in class or whatever. So I find that really amazing that this is but now I've heard we've had more lawsuits, Stu, and one of them has blocked their access to the Treasury system. We talked about the firing of the loan sustaining, and they blocked DOGE's access, and now they've also blocked their access to the Department of Labor systems because this is just not right. It's not right. And keeping these people secret is not right either. There should be transparency. And but there is a U.S. attorney. He's the interim U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia. His name is Ed Martin. And he has said that he is going to bring legal action anyone who impedes or threatens Elon's staff. I find that interesting because impeding them, I don't know how that's even illegal, number one. That's just you could argue that someone suing to stop them from getting sensitive data that they don't have access to is impeding. But
was he recently appointed or elected?
He's interim? Yeah, I think he's a Trump crony for sure.
Yes,
and so it's very and so beyond this, Stu, there's even more that this guy is doing, and this I'm kind of happy about. And I have mixed feelings. One of the most loathsome people in the United States Senate is our senior senator, Reptile Chuck Schumer, who was out in front of the U.S. aid office screaming and yelling like a hyena with all those far-left progressives in the House. I don't even know half of their names, and one of them has brought articles of impeachment against Trump already. They don't seem to learn their lesson that they have not been successful about impeachment proceedings against Trump. Well, apparently, as you called, we discussed this on the podcast a while ago when I was noting that the Democrats are just as violent, if not more so, and they have a long history of violence going back to the 60s. And one of the things that Schumer did is during the abortion decision, he stood out in front of the Supreme Court and he said, I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh. I don't want to do it in his awful little voice, and you have released a whirlwind, and this time you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Imagine a United States senator standing out and basically calling for the assassination of the judges who ruled on the abortion decision and not to his favor. So Ed Martin is now doing to Schumer what the Democrats did to Trump. He's investigating him criminally for these statements. And I would also hope that Elizabeth Warren would also be investigated because she made similar inflammatory remarks. And a matter of fact, she was out in front of U.S. aid also screaming like a hyena and going crazy. But what's funny is some Democrats, more centrist ones, David Axelrod being one of them, and Rahm Emanuel, they were all saying, is this how you should be fighting your battle over foreign aid, which a lot of people don't approve of anyway? Is this how the way you want to go? And yet, so Trump can be as despicable and stupid as he is, but the people who oppose him are worse. And that is why he was elected in the first place. Is this it's a smorgasbord of lawsuits, incompetence, and buffoonery, but it's also very and I forgot to mention this, Stu. Apparently, Musk and his team of 20-somethings, they have been installing AI on our national computer systems so that they can track where the money is going, where the way contracts are going, which should also trouble us. What do we are allowing unaccountable 25-year-olds and Trump and Musk to basically take control of central functions of our government. And look, Elon Musk is an interesting person and he's not stupid, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's setting booby traps and this is like an Austin Powers movie a little bit. If he probably knows he's not stupid, that him and Trump are not going to last forever, and he may be planning his own little, how should we say, revenge, and he could screw us all over. And Liz Cheney rightly noted today that he wasn't an American citizen. He's a South African until like the last 20 years, and he doesn't understand anything about America. And of course, he barked back at her on Twitter. And the language he uses on Twitter is also a little crazy. Anyone who says a thing about him, and this is, they're evil, they're radicals, they're communists, etc.
No, I have nothing more to add on that. I see a proliferation coming of litigation that's going to stall some efforts on the part of, that we're supposed to come out via executive orders. There'll be more chaos, and there's certainly enormous potential consequence to national security and chaos among the working forces and people around the world and leaders around the world saying, who do we now have as an ally? What protection should we give ourselves against this kind of rampant wildness?
Right. And no one seems to want to take note of this, most notably the people on Fox News who, as I said at the beginning,
that's not surprising.
They would applaud Trump if he pooped on his desk in the Oval Office and say, what a brilliant strategy. It's his way of showing the world that he's
There were one or two people on that show, weren't there, who left eventually because they didn't feel comfortable any longer.
Well, I also think they were kind of pressured out.
Oh, is that right?
Right. because I think that, that
Black guy. Wasn't there a black guy who was...
Juan William, he was a liberal voice. And I'm not exactly sure why they pushed him out. But, I mean, he was not a strident.
Blacko, yeah.
He was, he's not like a progressive crazy. He was definitely a liberal. But, yeah, Chris Wallace left a long time
That's
ago.
the fellow I was thinking.
Right, but Chris Wallace was kind of a straight shooter.
Oh, I
don't really think he was you wouldn't necessarily know what his viewpoints were.
I think he was, my recollection was there's a guy who spoke what he thought to be the truth, and he had an objective perspective, often, usually with facts behind it, and wasn't taking a party line.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's interesting, it's chaotic, it's crazy, but I'll tell you one thing, Stu, I don't think there'll ever be a Gaza Riviera. And if I go to Mexico, when I do and I take a swim, it's going to be in the Gulf of Mexico because no one's taking that nonsense seriously. And as far as Greenland is concerned, I have a funny feeling that's not going to be one of our territories either. And I know Rubio's going down to the Panama to discuss the Panama Canal and I guess they have exorbitant fees to enter and leave it, and that's what this is all about. Perhaps they'll work out some kind of deal over it.
I think they'll work out a deal where the Chinese are no longer present at their present locations at either end of the canal.
Something like that.
I think they'll do that. And I think Rubio struck me, during the nomination process when I listened to him on the hearings. He's just so mature now. And I remember it. Not that there was any... No, but he was matured.
He's a serious person, and he's someone who is a voice of reason.
And bright. I listened to him, and he was prepared to discuss the content of his job.
Right, as opposed to RFK Jr., who spews out half-truths. But unfortunately, the supposed Dr. Cassidy approved him, and turns my stomach too, because not only...
How could he do that?
Because
he wants to get reelected.
He does. And the thing is,
that's sick. It's like violating the Hippocratic Oath. I think that's what he's just done, really.
Well, apparently with these Republicans, they at the moment, they have absolutely no backbone whatsoever.
I was so disappointed in that. I thought, after listening to him in the hearings, I said, there's no way that man can't.
Who knows what they brought to bear on
Yeah.
I'm sure. But, at the end of the day, if you're 70 years old, you're a doctor, you've been successful, is it really that important to you to be in the Senate for another term?
Very disappointing.
But what can we expect in this era of whatever we want to call it? But anyway, I guess we're going to call this our last episode until you return from your hiatus of luxury, debauchery, and the rest. So we'll see you when you get out of those. I'll be here in New York in the snow.
Okay, thanks.